All right. So this is what we have seen yesterday. We had seen recursions, and we saw how recursions could be done in Python as well. Let me try to create something quickly and see how we can unpack args and keyword args, right? That is what we'll try to look at. So let me try to create a file and call this function args 01.py. So this is a Python file that I have created. And this is to be used for args. Okay, that is what we'll try to run. And then I'll write the main method. So underscore name underscore equals to underscore main, right? And then let me try to write pass here. Fine. So here we will try to write a simple function. Okay. The simple function is def. I say print description, and then I pass star args, right? And here we will try to return this particular function. So return, and then I'll try to present the separator as space, and then I'll say join of args. Okay, that is what I'll try to do here. Okay, so now let me pass certain values to it, right? Let's call this print description, and I pass first two values. Okay, let's say I pass name, Jignesh, and the department. So let's say this is Com Science department. Okay, that is what I pass. So now this is what would be returned. So I'll store this value into A and then print A. Fine, this is what I'll try to do and then run this program. So let me run this program and we get this output here. We get Jignesh and Com Science. This is what is the output that we retrieve. So this is our first function that we have called. So what we have passed is two values, right? And star args, or let's say if this was some variable, let's say we call this x and we can use this x inside. Okay, let's call this here like this, right? And then we run this. Then we have Jignesh Com Science. So this could be any variable. So I'm calling this as args for now. So this could be any variable that we could use. And we are trying to get these values in args. So whenever you represent this as star args, right? It will try to get these two values. Okay. And we are trying to join with a separator. So what is the type of this, right? Even before we print this, right? Let's check this type of args. So if I try to check the type of args, it is basically a tuple, right? This is what we get as the output. It is basically a tuple. So that is what we are trying to do here. We're trying to join the values within the tuple, right? That is what I have done here. Okay, so this is what is happening. Now, let's say I pass multiple values. Instead of Com Science, I pass also which year that particular person's study is in. So I say second year, right? So I pass second year. Now we are passing three values, right? So let me also put this print statement here. So if we are passing the star args, right? And then we are passing this in this fashion, and then we run this. This will give us three values. Let's say we remove the star here and then just run this in this fashion. Let's try to run this, what it says. It says print description, type error. Print description takes only one positional argument, but three were given. So when we remove the star, it indicates this args that we have is only taking one argument only. It does not multiple values that it can take. But when we provide the star, it becomes a multiple arguments, right? By default, it becomes a multiple arguments. And that is why it accepts multiple values, right? That is the difference between removing the star and keeping that star. Fine, that is what will happen. And we can pass multiple values. So if this was not there, the star was not there, then probably we have to end our function here. And then I comment this out so that that is not part of the program execution. And then I run this. Okay, so we get just as Jignesh is, split it into different characters and it is concatenated. That is what is the output. The function call is correct. The way we have called it, everything is fine, and whatever is being written is also fine. So adding the star makes a lot of difference. We can pass multiple values. That is what it helps us in doing. So we can add multiple values like this, and then it is taken care of internally. How we want to retrieve it and how do we want to select it. Okay, that is what we are trying to do. So Python takes care of, we are essentially passing multiple values and packing them. So this is essentially packing them and being used internally, right? That is what we have done. So let's try to write this a little bit, just add to something to it. So I'll say print description and then print description one instead of print description. I call this as print description one and then args. And then I use something called as a separator as a default argument. Okay, this is a default argument. And I present this as a front slash. Okay, and then end this function. What is a default argument? Default argument is specifying a default value for this particular argument that we have specified in the function. And this is allowed in Python. In some programming languages, this is not allowed. In some programming languages, this is allowed. And essentially, whenever we have functions that can accept default arguments, we can specify like this. If nothing is provided, then the default value is taken as this particular value, which is front slash, right? So how do we pass this? Just let us check that also. So I try to do this, and then instead of calling empty quotes, I call separator.join, and then we have args. That is what we have. Okay. And now let's say I want to use this function. I call this as B and then print description one. I use this. And initially I'll pass only what we passed for print description. Only these three values or two values. We began with two values, right? So let me try to do this. Okay. Only two values I'll pass. And then I'll print this. Okay. I'll print B. So let me comment out print A because we have already seen what it is printing. So let me try to do print B. So now we are passing Jignesh and ComScience to this particular value, right? And instead of space, we have a separator, which is essentially front slash. So let us run this. So it gives us the output as Jignesh front slash ComScience. Or instead of this, we want to have a colon, right? So I make the separator as colon. Then we get the separator as Jignesh colon ComScience. Or if you want to have an hyphen, right? Instead of colon, we can have that. Right, so we'll get Jignesh hyphen ComScience. This is our output. So let's say we want to add one more value to it, second year as well. This will still work, and we'll get an hyphenated string, right? Hyphenated string that would be present in the output. So we get Jignesh hyphen ComScience and hyphen second, right? This is what we get. And please note the output, right? We're getting always a tuple, right? That is what this star args is kind of converted into. When we pass this set of comma separated values, it is being set as a tuple, and separator is still hyphen. We have not used it. So now I want to also specify separator when I'm passing this, right? So we have specified our positional arguments. Now separator is equals to hyphen is a keyword, right? So every time the preference is first the positional arguments and then the keyword arguments. What are the keyword arguments here? Something where we have a attribute name or a argument name and its corresponding value. That is what will be treated as a keyword argument. Right now, this is not having any keywords. This is only taken as a positional. There is no value assigned to it. We are passing what should be taken for star args here. We are passing multiple values or a single value. Even if it is a single value, it will still work. Even if it is multiple value, it will still work. Now I want to use this. So I'll comment out print B and also A, and we'll start using this. So how to use this kind of a function, right? So this is something like this. We have C is equals to print description one. Okay. And I pass Jignesh first, only one value. It is still fine. And then separator, instead of having hyphen, I don't want to use the default value. So I pass this separator explicitly. So you do not have an interpreter. Okay. Instead of this, can you select the spider notebook? Because this might need some configuration. And have you installed Python installer from the extensions? Right? If you type in Python, right? The first extension that pops up here, right? You need to install this. Okay. Once this is installed, it's already installed. Now, do you see so there is one question, how do we install the Python installer? And you're not able to see it, right? So you will be seeing the interpreter here. Do you see something here? Select language mode. Can you click it? Or once you click it, you can select Python here. It will come up here. The interpreter comes up in the search window on the top. You see this here? On the top, it will come and you can select the Python. Okay, that should do. It's not showing up. Okay. It's not showing up. Then I see. 1 second. Then view. So you installed Anaconda, right? Are there any multiple installations? There are multiple installations, is it? Okay. So that's still okay. So we've installed the extension, that is fine. And then once that is done, so here Python interpreter is, can you select the Python interpreter from the bottom? That is also not visible right now. Create a file. So try to create a file. Okay, go to this place and create a workspace. Have you created a workspace? So have you created a file, .py file? Okay. And then this is not coming up, right? You're not able to see it, right? Okay. So if you do uh, try to use this command Control Shift and P. If this is on Windows, this should work on Windows. Control Shift and P. Right? Then it will ask for the Python interpreter. Right? And then you will be able to see it. Okay. So that is how you can select the interpreter. So if you do Control Shift and P on Visual Studio, let me try to do this again. So you will be seeing here how to add a Python interpreter from here. It says, please select a Python interpreter, and then you can select the multiple Anaconda versions on this. Okay. That is something that you do. It's not showing up, then probably the path is not proper. What you can do is go to the workspace and type in code space dot. Then probably that could be done. Or for now, if the settings are not proper, what you can do is you can use this spider notebook, because you have to set it. And once you select the interpreter, that should actually come up. Okay, you can use the spider notebook as an alternative. If this is not working, go to the spider ID. That should be default configuration. It will not really affect it unless and until we have to make some changes for Visual Studio Code. Okay. So the same program can be run in Spider ID. Then probably we'll check the configurations. So if you see here, right, you should actually get this Python select interpreter once you have created a Python file or a workspace related to it. And once you do it, you'll have, or you can enter the interpreter path. Okay, you have installed Python, right? You can actually have the path settings here. You can also add the settings and then see if it works. That is also another alternative. Okay. That should point to some C drive, and then you'll have Python. For example, if I go back, right, you see here, it shows up where the Python is installed. You should have this python.exe in the path. Generally, it actually picks up. Only once I have added the interpreter part, but as long as Anaconda install, restart the Visual Studio Code, create a workspace, and then create a Python file, and then add one of the interpreters. These are the multiple ways in which you can try. That is where we can add it. Okay. And once you add it, on the right side that you see here, right at the bottom, this part, it will actually show up which Python version is being used here. You will see here, and then you'll also have the interpreter that it is using. Fine. So it would be a .exe file that should pop up here. If you hover over it, you will see it is 3.9.13 on this Visual Studio Code, and it will pop up. All right. So okay, try to do that. Install. I think why this is because this error also sometimes it happens. Try to do this. Install it and then install Python. If you have the extension, try to restart it. And then Python is so Visual Studio Code is not detecting your interpreter. That is one thing that might be happening right now. So we might have to change a little bit of settings there. So what I would request you now is to check the Spider ID. That should fix it quickly. If you are trying to run this, you can check the Spider ID. Okay, you can debug that issues later. All right. So this is what we're trying to do. We are trying to add certain separators here. So instead of this default separator, what I'm trying to add this is essentially a semicolon separator, right? That is what I'm trying to add here. And then we get the output from this, and then I print it here. Fine. So this is what I'm trying to do here, right? We get Jignesh as far as now because there is nothing to be joined. There is only one value. So there is nothing to be joined. So it does not join. So what I'll do is I'll add one more value. So right, I'll add his department. I'll call this as com science. Okay, a computer science. And then I'll try to run this again. So now it adds it, right? If there are two values, it's added. So star arcs takes multiple values. If it was only one value and we pass it, it is treated as just a one value, and then it has nothing to join, right? So that is why it was printing Jignesh. Now I added two values. Now it prints two values separated by a semicolon. So that is how star arcs behaves. Now the same thing we will try to do with KW arcs. We used star arcs, and how does KW arcs behave, right? So I'll try to use this and call this print description, and this is a function too. And then instead of star arcs, we'll use two stars, and then call this two asterisks KW arcs, and then okay, then just print this, print KW arcs, what it is taking as input. Okay, so now let me try to pass something. So I said D is equals to print description of 2. And then I pass just Jignesh. Let's see. Okay, and anyways, we are printing what is being passed here. So let me pass this. And I'm not returning anything. So it should be none. So let me comment out these lines. Right. So I've commented out these lines and start running this. Okay. So now there is an error. It says print description 2 takes 0 positional arguments, but 1 was given. So there is no positional argument. What it takes is essentially a keyword arguments. right? A positional argument, if we were passing this as just like this, KW args, the interpreter understands that this is just a positional argument, right? And it prints Jignesh. If we add these stars, it is treated as, or if we add this asterisk, it is treated as basically a keyword argument. So what we should pass, let's say I pass this as name is equals to Jignesh. Let's say I pass like this. This would become a keyword argument. And let's run this again. So I run this again. Now it takes it correctly. We have just passed, instead of positional argument, we are passing this as a keyword argument. Name is equal to Jignesh, and what it is extracting out, it is kind of packing this as a dictionary. It is basically packing this keyword argument as a dictionary. That is what it does. So now let's say I want to add one more keyword. So I can add this like this. I would say profession. Oh, sorry, this was our department. So I would say department, and then his department as computer science. So I'll try to add department as computer science. And then we'll call this again, right? So if I call this again, this is again packed as a dictionary. Our keyword arguments are packed as a dictionary, right? This is basically a dictionary which is having key value pair. So whenever we use star KW args or two asterisks and KW args, we should pass the values for it as key value pairs. That is how it will work. Fine. So this is how we can understand what is star args and what is star KW args. So the sequence would be, let's say if I have name, or let's say I have ID and star args. Now ID should be passed mandatorily. KW args can be passed or cannot be passed. Okay, that is what it means. There are two arguments. One is a positional argument. The other one is a keyword argument. Which one is a keyword argument? Star KW args is a keyword argument. And ID is basically a positional argument. So if we want to use this, right, I will pass something like this. Let's say call this E and then print description of 2 and then ID 101 is enough for now. And instead of KW args, I will print ID also. Right. So this is what we'll do. Let me try to take this and put this here. So when I put this on drive, we know what we had done previously. So comment this out. So, right, I comment this out. And then now let me, we already printing it something. Yeah, we are printing KW args and ID. So let me run this now. Right. So we get the empty dictionary and 101. Oh, all right. So there is one message we see I got VS Code to work. So you kind of installed Python or something, or was it a quick hack to set the path? All right, you installed Python and it was detected by VS Code. That could be the easiest way to do it. All right. Okay, so that is how we'll be able to check for VS Code. But coming back to our session here. So now what we are trying to do here is here we are trying to run this particular function, print description 2. Oh, you're not getting an output. Oh, probably the interpreter is not configured, I guess. Yeah, check the interpreter if it is pointing to the correct path and you're trying to print statements and see if it is working. Or alternatively, use Spider for now, and then you can debug the VS Code later. Okay, so now let's say I pass something like this, 101. As we see here, KW args, which is essentially taking the keyword arguments as dictionary, it is printing out an empty dictionary, right? And ID is being considered as a positional argument. Let's say if we have 101, if we have just 101 and then try to run this would throw an error, right? Because it expects a positional argument, which is ID. If we had removed this and just had KW args and then we still run it, it would be still a correct way of running it, right? That is the difference of using ID and not using it, and then passing the values from where it is being called. So I use 102, and then also I pass the same thing that we have done here. We pass name is equals to Jignesh, right? And then we'll be able to see what is the output for this, right? We get the dictionary constructed from this keyword argument that we are passing, and also 102 for the name. Okay, so that is how we'll be able to do this. So any questions on this especially? Okay, if there are no questions, then what we'll do is we'll see what is unpacking, right? We have seen what is packing. Now, the values that we are passing as parameters and then the arguments are packing them. We'll look at what is unpacking, okay? So let's try to run this quickly here. I call this unpacking 01.py, okay? And how unpacking works in Python. Okay, so let's try to check this. Okay, okay, what I would request for the time being is like create a file in uh, IDE, which is basically Spider, and then we can run from here. Okay, that is what I'll also do, so that so nobody feels that they are being left out. I understand the urge to work from an IDE, especially Visual Studio Code. So we'll use Spider IDE, so everybody is on the same page. Okay, so let us what we'll try to do for the benefit of others. We'll use Spider ID, and let me try to save this file. And I call this as unpacking. Okay, and then we'll try to quickly see how we unpack values here. Okay, so now let me call this something like, let's say I have unpack values. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll just try to do something here quickly. I call args is equals to 7,14. Okay, and then I say return list of range of args. Right, so this is what I'll try to do, and then call this particular function from here. I call unpack value. Fine, this is what I'll try to do here, and then run this program quickly. And then we have to print it, right? So let me try to print this in this fashion. Okay, I print this values in this fashion. Okay, now what has happened is we called this function and we provided two values, 7, 14, right? And when it unpacked, right, what does range take? Range takes the input like this. I'm trying to use the right hand side in the output, right? Range takes something like this, range of 7, 14, right? This is what it takes as input, right? And if we use this and then we run this, this will give us range of 7, 14. So we want to unpack this 7, 14 and then pass here range of star of args. So star of args will actually unpack this, right? So let's say we have args is equals to 7, 14, right? And then I write like this and then use star of args. we cannot use, okay, we cannot use it here. So I'll try to use it within the range function itself, range of star of args. Okay, all right, I can use this here in this fashion, range of star of args, right? Right, it gives us range of 7, 14, right? This is how it unpacks the values. That is what it means. Okay. So, or the other way to look at this is, let's say I have certain values. Let's say I write a function like this, def unpack names, unpack names. That is what I'll do. I'll write here star of args. Right. So now what we did is we have 7, 14, right? And when we pass this 7, 14, this is essentially converted into a tuple, right? That is what we did. We have 7, 14 as values, and then it is unpacking it. But probably this example might look a little bit weird. Give me a minute. So what I'll try to do is I'll try to show you how this happens when we say unpack things. Okay, so let me try to print something like this. Right, let's say I have star of x comma y, and then I assign multiple values. Ravi, this is something that we have already seen this, right? So Ravi, Kishan, and then so we have some values like this, okay? And then I say print of x and then print of y. Now, what we'll try to do is I'll call this function from here. Oh, sorry, just need this, right? And then let me try to run this quickly. So what has happened here is we got Ravi, Kishan, Kriplani, Mahesh, and Suraj. So Ravi, Kishan, Kriplani, and Mahesh were assigned to star of x, right? That is what has happened. When we try to do this and then we use star of x, so this essentially is packaged as these values, correct? Right? It became a list of values, and then y value is only taken as Suraj. Right? This is something that we were passing into the functions and how we are trying to use this. Is that right? That is what we were trying to do. Correct? So now when we are trying to pass this, or when we are trying to have multiple values and pass to a particular variable, right? So when we want to do this, we are using star of x. Okay, this is what we have done. Correct? So let me come to the next thing. Now, I will do something like this. Instead of doing this way, I will say unpack values of 2. But right now, what we did previously was essentially packing it. But let me try to show what we essentially want to do. So let's say we have names. Fine. And I pass tuples to it. I use Ravi, Kishan, and Kriplan. Oops, this is not getting. Right. This is what I try to do. Names. Okay. And now I use another two names. For example, x is equals to, or Let me call name1 is equals to Mahesh. Let me take this value and assign it. And name2 is equals to Suraj. Right? And then I call this as print name1 comma star of names comma name2. Okay, this is what I try to do here. And then let me call this now unpack value 2, and let's see what it is printing out.
You forgot to add a quote on line 24.
Oh, all right. Yeah. Right. Right. So that is what I try to do here. So now, but then still something is missing. I think this I is missing. Right. Okay. So now we have completed this, and then we have name1 star names and name2. And let me try to run this. Now, what we see here is we get the values unpacked, right? It was a tuple, right? Ravi, Kishan, and Kriplani was a tuple. And when we use this particular way of notation, star and names, it got unpacked. Name one was Mahesh and name two was Suraj, right? So we get Ravi, Kishan, and Kriplani, right? This is what is unpacking means. So the previous way where we pass these values, this was essentially packing of things and then passing to a variable. But then when we want to unpack multiple values, we assign or we got a tuple and then the usage would be star of the particular variable. Fine. So if I try to do this here again, let's say I use star of x again and then run this and call unpack one instead of unpack value two and unpack value. Let's see the output for that. Right? So that is how you get the output when we try to run it. Fine. So that is how we'll be able to do so. Now you see Ravi, Kishan, Kriplani, and Mahesh printed out nicely, which is unpacked. That is what I did for this particular function. Right? So the way we use it depends, is it in a packed mode or in an unpacked mode? So please try to run these examples and see for yourselves what essentially these values are doing. And when we have these objects or these values denoted in list, now we want to use them as it is. So 7, 14 have to be placed here. That is why we used star of args and they came as 7, 14 in this place. Just like what has happened to these values. A tuple was just treated as a single comma separated value and print them out with a separator, which is space, right? So let me comment this particular unpack value and then use unpack value of 2. Now run this again. You will see the output. Fine. We are getting this none because nothing is being returned from this function. So either we write it like this or we write return. It will anyways be none. And that is why we are printing out like this. Or what we can do is we can remove this print function from here. Right. Let me try to remove this print and then we have unpack value of 2. What is the purpose of unpacking? Essentially, when we have multiple values and we are not sure of how many values would be used, right? In such case, unpacking will be helpful. Right? Right now, we have passed 4 values. Let's say there are 5 values and the last value is always for the single variable y. And how many values are being passed, we are not sure. And that we want to store it in a variable. That is where we'll use this packing notation and then unpack it later. Right? We are not sure how many tuples or how many values in a tuple are being constructed or in a list being constructed because this is a data structure. Right? In such cases, whenever we are not sure of how many values would be there in a data structure and we want to unpack it, in such cases, this would be helpful. So let's say I add one more value here. Instead of Kriplani, I had Jagdish now. right? I add Jagdish again. And now I run this. It would still be helpful for unpacking us. Instead of writing, what does it mean instead of writing is, right? If I write like this, something like this, A comma B comma C, right? And then I remove this Jagdish. Okay, let me try to remove this. Instead of star names, I remove this and have A comma B comma C. This would be still a good way of understanding this. But tomorrow, let's say I have 4 or 5 values, and we are unpacking these 4 or 5 values only into three variables, then only 3 values will be printed out. We cannot have the other values captured. So in such case, we want to unpack them. We can just specify this, and then instead of writing A, B, C, we write the star names. If you want to iterate, then we can iterate over them. If you want to print them out, we can print them. That is the use of unpacking. Does this make sense, guys? Why we are using unpacking? And a lot of functions in Python use star args and double star KW args, or essentially use them as keyword arguments and positional arguments that are passed as star args. Not positional arguments, but just as, sequence of values that we want to pass, or some kind of multiple values that we want to pass. We want to use them in a function. Then we'll use these kind of arguments. Right? Does this make sense, guys? Why do we want to pack and why do we want to unpack? All right. So now, once we have done this, let's try to create a new file and then move on to the unpacking of dictionary values. Let's try to do that as well. It's the same thing, or probably I might use the old file itself, because for a new topic, maybe that would be helpful. Unpack dictionary. Okay, let's just do it quickly and then we'll move on to the next topic. All right, so unpack dictionary, and then I construct something like this. Okay, dictionary of very quickly. I'll say this as A is equals to 1 and B is equals to 1. Okay. How do I do this? Okay, that's fine. So we'll have numbers like this, and then we can use this, or I'll call this numbers from somewhere else. What I'll do is I'll just remove this for now and then say return A star B. And I'll not call this unpack dict because we'll be anyways unpacking it later. I'll call this find product. That would make more sense to call this function as find product. That would be a better way of doing it. Okay, I call this as find product, and then from the main function, I use this numbers and then have A colon A colon. So I should represent this in strings. In strings, A colon 3 and B colon 4. Right, this is what I do, and then I have find product, and we'll run this quickly. Okay, so for the first time, what I do is I call find product, and then because A is equals to 1 and B is equals to 3 is what we pass. So I'm not passing anything here, and let's see what happens. Okay. Right, and what this find product returns is the product of two numbers, A comma B. Okay, let's try to run this. Did I run this or no? We returned it, and then I'm not printing it out.
We are not printing.
Yeah. Just give me a minute. Okay, yeah. So let me try to run this quickly, and then we get the value as 1 as the output, right? So we are not passing because this is a keyword argument. This is not a positional argument. So because this is a keyword argument and there is a default value, it does not really accept or it does not really expect input to be passed each and every time, right? So this is what we are trying to do. And if nothing is passed, the default value 1 for A and default value 1 for B is taken, and it gives us the product, right? So now we'll change this. This is our first step that we have done. So let me try to comment that out. And then I'll say result, find product. And then we'll unpack numbers and pass them, right? So unpack numbers, A is 3, B is 4, and then I pass it to this particular function. So this particular representation is passing A is equals to 1 and B is equals to, so A is equals to 3 and B is equals to 4. And that is what it does. It passes these values as it is. This is what unpacking means. It is passing a dictionary. So we get the output as 12, right? So that is what is happening with respect to unpacking of a dictionary. This is how we could use, right? So that is the usage of how do we unpack a dictionary. A very simple example of how do we unpack it. Okay, and this could be built better. So let's say we want to do something like multiple values, or we want to pass some string values. That is also something that we can do. But then if we want to pass some default value always, let's say there should be a positional argument, we can add something like this C. And when we call this, then probably we have to pass some C value, which is something like a string, or right now C is mentioned as a variable, so it could be string. So I pass this hello to it. Then even if we do not pass this should still be okay, right? It always expects the positional argument. So we are passing for C, and then A and B values are anyways, kind of optional. So we get the value as 1. Right, but then if we want to pass it, then we can pass those values as well. Numbers, I pass these numbers, and then we can get the value as 12 in this case, right? We get the value as 12. Fine, so this is how it unpacks the values. So, and then passes them. So A is equals to 3 and B is equals to 4 is what is passed, and then it computes 3 times 4 and it is returned back. Okay, so hope this is fine. Any questions on this? All right, if there are no questions, then we will move ahead. The next thing is essentially we'll try to look at what is lambda expressions. So let me try to create what is the lambda expressions. So lambda expressions are essentially anonymous functions. Okay, when we say anonymous, they don't have a name, right? That is what a lambda expression is. They don't have a name. That is what is an anonymous function. And in order to create lambda expression, we use what is called as the lambda keyword, right? We use what is called as a lambda keyword. So let's say I have y, and then I use lambda x colon x to the power of 2, right? This is what I use. And if we are trying to, okay, let me save this as well. Right. So when we try to use this, right, and then we want to perform some expression, what essentially is that instead of writing a function and we want to use this, then probably we'll use a lambda expression. Why do we use a lambda expression? Maybe it is not used multiple times, right? Multiple times usage is not there, or we do not have a specified functionality, right? In such cases, we go for lambda expressions, right? And then we want to quickly get some output, then lambda expression might be helpful. Okay, in such cases, we might use lambda expression. So how do I use this? So I write a main method for this because I'm going in the file mode. I try to use the main method all the time. Just because we are using this, I would be more comfortable writing like this rather than just writing a plain file with these instructions. It would be similar to a notebook, right? Let me do this and then write y. Okay, y. Let me try to print y, what y comes out as. Right, it says it is basically a function, right? So lambda expression is basically computed as a function. So this is returning as an output. Now I want to use this function. So how do I use this lambda function, right? So I pass y of 2. So what it returns is basically a function. We have defined the variable and colon indicates that the input is passed to the left side of the colon and output is to the right side of the colon. That is what lambda expression means. For a function, we have an input and an output. Similarly, for a lambda expression, we have an input x. After the colon, we have an output. Fine, that is what is the lambda expression. And this is basically similar to a function, and we can store this in a variable. A function can be stored in a variable in Python. Right, that is what we have done. And as you see, the output is basically a function and it says it is a lambda expression. So if we want to get an output or see how an input could be passed to this lambda expression, we can do or call it as we do for a function. Function name of some input. So I'm passing the input x and then we see the value output as 4. Right, that is what we get the output as. Fine. So this is how a lambda expression can be used. Instead of this, let's say we want to use a string value where we want to get uppercase values. So I say uppercase is equals to lambda and it takes an input as a string. So I represent that input with the variable y and then I say y dot upper. Okay. And then print uppercase. I want to use this. So I use uppercase of some input. As you see it, when we hover over it, says y as an input. So I pass some input like hello. Right. And then this should be I. So I make this. There is a red mark here because I was not there and now it should run. Right. So everything is changed into upper. Right. So we use lambda expression for single line function. Generally, if you want to write a function in a single line, we can go for lambda expression. Or if the usage is not multiple times, in such cases, we can go for lambda expressions. Right. Another case is, let's say I want to use or have some values where, let me try to use something. We have a function called as map, right? And I use lambda function. It expects an input called as a function as an input, right? Lambda x and x to the power of 2. Okay. And another input that it expects is a iterable values. So I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So instead of writing like this, lambda x colon x to the power of 2, I can write something like this, def of square val, okay? That is the function. It accepts input and I can say return x to the power of 2. This is the same thing that we have written for lambda, right? There is nothing but equivalent to what we have with respect to a function definition. And it is taking as an iterable. Now we get the, we are saying this function that we have should be applied to each and every value of this particular list. So instead of doing like this, I can, let me comment this out and tell you what we are essentially doing. Let's say I have this as some list value. I store this in list val as my variable and I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, for I in list val. We can iterate over, right? And then I create an empty list so that we have the output also ready. So I call output and then for I in list val, right? For I in list val, I call this function square val of I. So every time that we have, we get a value and then whatever the output is, I store this in Y and we want to, or Z, because y was defined. So or I'll try to comment this previous set of things that we have used for lambda, then use this. Right, I use this and then I have something like this, and it is showing red mark because it's still not completed. So z is square value, and then I append to out, and this should be z. Okay, that is what I'm trying to do. And then print out. Fine. So we create a list of values from 1 to 5, and we create an empty list out, and we iterate over this list value using for loops. Inside the for loop, we call our function square val for each value, and we append the output to the out variable. And then finally, we print the out variable after the iteration is complete, right? So what does this give as an output? We get the square of each of those values. This is what we have done here. Fine. The same thing, what we have done here, we have seen this similar to what we have done here in list comprehensions. The same thing we have done in list comprehension. If you recall, we can do this in list comprehensions, or you can try this later. Try to do this in list comprehensions. Now, instead of this, we want to have a single line output using lambda functions. Right? So what I have done here is, right, I have written something like this. Map of this lambda function, which is nothing but this particular thing. It takes an input and it gives us square of that number. Now, how does this map works? This lambda function is applied on each of these iterable values. So what does map expect? Map expects a function. We can either pass square val or we can pass this lambda function. Both of them are fine. We'll go with the lambda notation for now. Next thing probably sometime later. Now we are passing this lambda function inside this. And this lambda function should be applied on each of this iterable object. It gives us, what does it gives us as an output? Before I do this, let us try to see what is it is giving as the output. So I say print of this particular value. Okay. So let us check what it is giving as an output. So it says it is a map object. It is kind of an iterable. So I want to change this. So I enclose that into list. Okay. So what we get as an output is basically a list. So that is what would be given to us. So we get the square of the numbers. So when we do this map applies this function. It iterates over each of this particular value and gives us an output, which is again an iterable output. And that iterable output is passed to list. List of some sequence of values is nothing but we have seen is a list object. That is how we create a list object. That is what we have seen previously. And it giving us list of values. Fine. Is this clear? The same thing could be done in multiple ways. We can use loops. We can use list comprehension, or we can use this map function and then pass it to list. Oh, right. This is absolutely right. Instead of writing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the better way is always to use it, the reference that we have created, and then run this again, right? We can just pass this list val that we have created. Fine. That is a better way of writing the code, and that is what we can do. Any questions on this with what we have done? All right. So if there are no questions, what we'll do now is we will take a simple example for break statements. Break was introduced. We have seen pass and we have seen some other keywords, but I think break was not introduced previously. Let's try to do a break statement and then we will see if we can continue or we can take a logical break for today. So break statement. Okay, break statement and continue statement. Okay, so I hope this is visible. So now what I'll do is, let me try to quickly create a list of values. So let's say I have friends is equals to, and then I have the names like Amrut, then Bahubali, then Chandra, and then Dabesh, Ritik, and Ranveer. Okay, so these are my friends. And what I want to do is quickly iterate over them. This is something that we have done. So I call this as for name in friends. Okay, for name in friends. And then if name is equals to Chandra, right? I put this condition within the for loop. If name is equal to Chandra, I say we are exiting the loop. Okay, the loop is done with. Okay, if the name is Chandra, we say the loop is done with, and then we print the name. This should be hedge, and then I say break. So this comes out of the for loop. Then I say name is name. For all the other things, I would like to print it. So I write this within the for loop. So there is a condition within the for loop, right? There is a condition within the for loop, right? For name in friends, if name is Chandra, then print the value and then break it out. Otherwise, print name is name, right? That is what we want to do. Okay. So we use a simple break statement. And as I said, I would like to use the main method when we are trying to use this here. So that becomes a nice way of doing it. So, and then I add this code here. That's it. And we are done. We are good with the indentation. And let me run this. So this is done with Chandra. So Amrut and Bahubali are printed. And once Chandra is encountered in the iteration, it prints out this is done with Chandra. So it breaks out and we are out of the loop, right? This is basically a break statement. Fine. So you might be already aware of break statement. That is what we can do, right? There is something else which can be used with for. We have something called as an else. So what I'll do is I'll simply write, or we'll say this is for and else in Python. Right? I call this for and else in Python. So I use something like this for n in range of, let's say 2 to 20. Okay. And for x in range of 2 to n. So we want to find the prime numbers. Okay. That is what we want to do. And if the number, so what we have is, I want to find all the prime numbers from starting from 2 and ending at 20. And we want to check if they are prime or not. So every time I want to divide each of that numbers that we are iterating over from 2 to the number less than itself, right? Let's say, or 1 less than itself, right? That is what we want to iterate over. So if n percentile x equals to 0, what does this mean, right? What is n? N is the value, first value, and x is what is being iterated inside, right? So let's say we start with 3. So it should, or it is starting from 2. For the first iteration, it will be only for 2. If it is divisible by 2, then that particular number, so it will not go to 2, because for 2, it is not going to iterate. It will be a prime number. But if it is divisible by 2 or 3 or any other number less than itself, then it is not a prime number. If it is not divisible by these numbers, then it is sorry, if it is divisible by some number less than itself, it is not a prime number. If it is not divisible, then it would be a prime number, right? So that is what we try to check here. So we are trying to check if the number is divisible by some other number, and if it leaves a reminder, then probably it is not a prime number. And then we just print a message saying that n and then equals, and then I say x, and then I provide this indication that it is divisible, and then I do this. Okay. So what it means is that n is equals to product of the number that we are trying to divide the original number n, and then what is the remainder of it, or the quotient that we get. So it is a product of the number which is being used to divide n and the quotient that we retrieve. So that is what would be the product of these two numbers as n. That is what I try to print here. And then I break, right? This is an inner loop, right? I want to break out of the inner loop. So once it is divisible by some other number, then it should not be iterated over. So I say break, right? It is a composite number, so we don't want to iterate again, right? So the first encounter is done. And then for this for loop, we can have an else block, right? If it has exhausted all of the numbers and still the number is not divisible by any of the numbers less than itself, then n is supposed to be a prime number. N, and then we just provide this formatting is a prime number. Correct? This is what we try to do. So we can have else block for a for block. That is what we can use, and we can check this out. So we are checking for a range of 2 to 20, and then we divide by the numbers less than itself. That is what 2 to n would give us, right? Range of 2 to n, this inner block. And then we divide the number by all the numbers less than itself. And if any of these numbers less than itself is, it divides n and a remainder is 0, then it is not a prime number. If the options are exhausted in this inner loop, then it comes to the else block and it would be a prime number. Right? So we get all the prime numbers. Right? What is more important, I think, rather than considering what is prime and not prime is not important, but probably we are looking at, we can construct an else block within a for block, or we can have a else block as a companion to a for block. Right? So this is about the else block. And finally, we use continue. We can also use continue. And how do we use continue is just the same thing. I use the same code. I'll not write anything else, and I'll just change this, okay? And if name is changed, we broke it, right? We'll not break it. It is the same. It's almost the same, but I would not try to, come up with a new code. I just use this, and then I'll not even have this printed. And if the name is Chandra, let's not break it. We are friends, so I want to continue it. Fine, that's it. And nothing else we change. I don't want to break my friendship with Chandra. I say continue my friendship with Chandra, who has been amazing. I do this, and then it prints out all the names. Amrit, Bahubali, Dinesh, Ritik, and Ranveer. But then we are not printing out Chandra. That's it. Okay. So it continues the loop, and no action is taken, and it does not come to this point. Whenever the Chandra condition is matched with the name in friends, and we just say continue. We do not want to come to this point. It just continues and goes again back to for loop, back to the for loop, and then it starts continuing from the base, right? So that is how the output is printed. So name Amrit, Bahubali, Dabesh, Ritik, and Ranveer. All right. So these are some of the other statements that are available in Python. We had seen only pass and we had seen for loops, and then we didn't come across break and continue. So we have already completed break and continue as well. So this is also done, and there could be an else block for the for block. We had seen else for if elif, right? That is what we had seen previously in the conditional decision making session. So we can also have an else for the for loop. All right. So any questions on this? All right. So silence means that there is no questions. So, all right, we do not have any questions. So what I'll do is I'll quickly create a file and then see how do we import something, and then we'll stop here and then we'll continue with this in our next session. So I can use the other data structures that are there in Python. And how do we use them? We call them using the from keyword, and then I write it at the top of the file. And the better way is to write it at the top of the file. So we write it like this. So from collections, and then we have import, and then we use something called as a named tuple. Okay. So that is what we use, and we will stop the session for today, and then we will see what collections are in our next session. All right. So we can use collections in this fashion. And what are collections? These are similar to what we have seen, like tuples, lists, dictionary, etc. And these are better than what they are for use cases where we can use them well, right? And wherever tuples are used, we can use named tuple, and we'll see this in next session. If there are any questions to what we have discussed today, or if you have any questions, we may take them up now. If there are no questions, then we'll stop the session today and then continue on our next topic on collections in our next session. All right, so there are no questions. Thank you so much. Have a good night and a good weekend, or a great weekend and good night. Bye-bye.